这个它是收音的。
红的它就关了。
I call the meeting to order, and we can start. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon here in Geneva, and greetings to everyone else in different parts of the world. I'm taking this moment just to remind delegates of the housekeeping rules in a very summarized fashion. Yesterday I gave a detailed account of the rules, but for today I just wanted to summarize the rules, and I take it that we are familiar now with the housekeeping rules. The first one, just to confirm, we have a live interpretation for all the sessions, and you have an option of choosing the language that you would want to use during the sessions. And I think the modalities of choosing the language were explained to you yesterday, but it's available. But secondly, regarding the speakers list, we don't have a speakers list prepared ahead of time, but we would take speakers during the time of speaking when they raise their nameplate or the request for the floor via the chat function. So my colleagues who are manning the secretariat desk will be able to monitor the screen to assess who wishes to take a platform at any time. But of course, when you are called upon to speak, you are requested to switch on your microphone. If you are participating remotely, you are requested to turn on your microphone as well as your camera. For those who are participating here physically, we ask you to keep a 1.5 meter distance between yourself, and you can measure that by keeping an empty seat in between yourselves. So we are required to observe the the COVID protocols as part of our commitments to the managers of the facility. And finally, we would appreciate if delegates can limit their movements around the room, only keep it to a bare necessity if it's required, but most of the time, if you can just try to eliminate moving around the room. With this out of the way, I would like to take this opportunity to indicate to you that today we are starting with the session on Article 11. And with me here is a facilitator for Article 11. And I have the pleasure then to introduce Ms. Stella Petrovic, who is the facilitator of Article 11 Subworking Group. She will facilitate this session. Stella, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dumisani. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues. At the very beginning, I would like to thank to all delegates who are participating in person, but at the same time, to all who are participating remotely. Yesterday, we had a very dynamic meeting, and according to the agenda, I hope that we will have the whole week pretty the same. As the facilitator of the Vegeti subworking group on Article 11, diversion, I'm going to present in short our plan of work and today's agenda. According to multi-year working plan of a subworking group on Article 11, diversion may occur during 3 stages: before, during, and after the transfer. In line with that, we divided discussion into 3 parts, and during the previous meetings of CSP5, 6, and 7, we already discussed the first part, possibility of diversion that may occur before the transfer. Today, we are going to unpack the next stage of transfer chain, during which diversion may occur, namely during the transfer. In this sense, agenda is divided into 2 parts or 2 sessions. First session will pay special attention to the role of transit and transshipment states in addressing and preventing diversion. The second session is going to discuss the role of private sector and civil society in mitigating diversion risks. In order to better facilitate the discussion and to prepare delegates for this meeting, we circulated in advance a background paper, namely the role of transit and transshipment states in preventing diversion. I hope that all of you get the paper in advance. And according to the paper, today's discussion will focus on three different parts. First part of background paper focuses on practical and legal challenges faced by transit and transshipment states in preventing diversion during the transit. It can occur during the transit by sea, air, or land, in this case, road or rail. Second part of background paper explores the measures that can and are being taken by transit and transshipment states to mitigate the risk of diversion during the transfer. And lastly, the third part examines a very important role of cooperation and information exchange among states. So the paper focuses on diversion in very strict sense, where we have a situation that exporting state already authorized the shipment, and diversion happens during the transportation and route in some different state. Regarding technical details, I think now we have a few minutes, less than 1 hour and a half, for interventions and discussions. In order to use the time as much as we can, I suggest to give the floor to you, and we are open for interventions and discussion. Please. I think that the delegation of Malawi would like to speak. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Madam Facilitator, for granting me the floor. Because this is a Malawi's maiden speech to this assembly, allow me to make some introductory remarks, which will largely be to echo the sentiments that other delegates have already made, but they are worth repeating and also for the record. Firstly, we would like to congratulate the Arms Treaty Secretariat to have made it possible for this meeting to be a reality in these difficult COVID pandemic times. Secondly, we would like to applaud the Secretariat for the wonderful work being done to, among others, coordinate the activities of various working groups on the treaty's effective implementation. Thirdly, Malawi would also like to recognize the commitment being made by the different working groups on the effective treaty implementation. This commitment is being seen by the progress being made in the formulating draft guidelines that will help the effective implementation of the treaty. Having said this, allow us to make the following general comments. Malawi agrees with all previous presenters that the effective treaty implementation will help curb the illicit movement of conventional arms and consequently help to curb untold miseries that stem from illegal possession of the same. We noted with gratitude from yesterday's presentations that were made yesterday that some state parties have already started aligning their national legislation to be in line with the treaty. This shows the global commitment to end illicit movement of conventional arms, which will also contribute immensely to world peace. Now, turning to the issue under discussion. Diversion is one of the key ways that would assist in conventional arms falling in wrong hands. We note, though, that dealing with diversion is a complex issue because of the multiplicity of stakeholders involved in conventional arms transportation and transit. Malawi would like to adopt the guidelines which have been made in this paper, as they have, by and large, addressed most of the legal and other hurdles that might be faced in the fight against the illicit movement of conventional arms. We would also like to note that dealing with diversion needs a multi-sectoral approach because of the multiplicity of the parties involved in the transit and transportation of conventional arms. This means that the successful eradication of diversion depends largely on the goodwill of all state parties. In this regard, therefore, Malawi would like to plead with all state parties to make sure that they do the needful so that the diversion can be dealt with decisively. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Malawi, for your intervention. Now I'm giving the floor to the Ivory Coast, please.
Merci. Thank you very much, Madam Facilitator. As it is the first time that Côte d'Ivoire is taking the floor, I would also like to associate myself to the speakers who preceded me to express my thanks to the ATT Secretariat, which has made this week's meetings possible and has made our participation possible. I would like to happy to see that in the C6 Secretariat of the ATT that has taken on board the sponsorship program. I would also like to express my thanks to all the groups and subgroups that have undertaken very significant preliminary work, which has given us an outline of our work, which facilitates the discussions throughout this preparatory meeting, or these preparatory meetings. To come back to today's theme, Côte d'Ivoire, as my colleague from Ghana said yesterday, the whole procedure for dealing with this issue is more or less channeled by the ECOWAS Convention on light and small caliber weapons. Nevertheless, the convention only relates to that category of weapons. However, within my countries that has two ports, the issue of the misappropriation and Niger, for example, imports its weapons through our harbors. And in the principle, any transfer of arms is forbidden in the ECOWAS area, and it is only through an exemption procedure that weapons can be acquired, which means that already beforehand the weapons that have to come through Côte d'Ivoire are already known in terms of quantity and type, and that Côte d'Ivoire, like the other 14 states of our association, have given its agreement for arms that are transiting through Côte d'Ivoire, and a certificate of final user which has to be monitored. But the principle of ECOWAS is a marking and registration of weapons, and even tracing from the manufacturer to the final user, which means that all weapons are marked, recorded, and monitored in our harbors. And when the conformity is confirmed with the exemption certificate and the final user certificate, the weapons are scanned and then transported outside of Côte d'Ivoire with a customs and security escort. It is with this escort that these weapons are transferred to the importing state, which has to go through Côte d'Ivoire. A very effective measure which significantly reduces or even eliminates any misappropriation. But as the principle, tracing and systematic follow-up of the weapons. We have all the documents which details the weapons to the last unit. Now, as to the participation of non-authorized players, ECOWAS forbids that any state can accept the transit of weapons through its country for these weapons to be in the hands of non-state actors unless they are authorized by the member state within which they are working. These are measures which seem quite effective to avoid any situation, but perfection unfortunately does not exist. But this is what I can say in terms of diversion for Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you.
Thank you, Côte d'Ivoire, for sharing information regarding your measures on transit and transshipment into your state. Thank you very much. Now the floor, I'm giving the floor to the delegation of Switzerland, please.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. Let me first of all express Switzerland's gratitude for your much appreciated work in light of the unfavorable circumstances related to the COVID-19 pandemic. In Switzerland's opinion, transit through a state's airspace pose the greatest practical challenges, as the prevention of diversion in such transfers is more difficult than over land or sea, where a transit or transshipment can be stopped and controlled if necessary. In order to still prevent diversion, Switzerland has imposed a licensing requirement for arms transit in civil aircraft through its airspace. As in the case of transit or transshipment by land, Switzerland examines whether an export license from the exporting state and an import license or an end-user certificate from the state of destination or final recipient are available when an application for transit through Swiss airspace is submitted. As arms are dangerous goods in aviation, airlines must notify national aviation authorities of overflights with dangerous goods. For this reason, Switzerland has decided that applications for transit with arms through its airspace must be submitted to the National Aviation Authority. Once the National Aviation Authority has received the applications, it passes them on to the National Licensing Authority for assessment. This cooperation with the National Aviation Authority ensures that no overflights take place with arms on board without the appropriate authorizations. Based on our experience, a licensing requirement for all types of arms transit and transshipment appears to be an effective measure to mitigate diversion. Therefore, an import license or end-user certificate is mandatory. If the examination of these documents reveals any discrepancies, they must be investigated. Switzerland primarily involves foreign embassies in Switzerland and Swiss embassies in the country of destination to clarify the revealed discrepancies. In order to facilitate this clarification process, it would be helpful to have a list in the framework of the ATT which shows the responsible authorities to issue export and import documents as well as end-user certificates. This way, we could contact the responsible authorities directly instead of taking the detour via the embassies to clarify the discrepancies. State cooperation is essential in that regard. In addition to the licensing requirement for all types of arms transits and transshipments, the custom authority also has an important role to play in mitigating diversion. It is empowered to check the goods and the transport documents of an arms transit or arms transshipment. For this reason, the Swiss National Licensing Authority, together with the Customs Authority, has created a risk list on which certain foreign final recipients are noted. These final recipients can be on the list, for example, because they have been involved in diversion cases in the past. If a final recipient is on this list, the custom authority stops every delivery to this final recipient and checks the goods and the transport documents. As already mentioned during the last meetings of the working group, Switzerland would suggest to all states to use the ATT points of contact for information exchange more frequently. Finally, the diversion information exchange forum will give a good platform to share diversion experience in the transit phase. Thank you, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you for a very detailed overview. And now I'm giving the floor to MAAT for peace, please.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator, and thank you to the Secretariat for the efforts exerted in order to coordinate the meetings. It is interesting to get to know the opinions of everyone. Article 11 with regards to diversion is one of the main objectives of the treaty. Now, in accordance with the agenda, there are certain basic measures that have to be taken by states, specifically transition countries, whether through airspace or land, and where you need the agreement of the receiving states and the exporting states to provide all the necessary documents. No doubt this is an active and effective mechanism, but if we look at reality, we will see that this is not applicable in reality. There are discrepancies between the notification about diversion, and we don't have a clear mechanism that can be used by member states, except a very low number of states, and therefore the international community might feel anxious regarding the cooperation between states. But we have certain unofficial statistics that we would like to share with you and with the technical secretariat. For example, in 2016 and until 2020, the transit or the movement of weapons increased by 25%, and they increased in the Middle East from 33% or by 33%, and the biggest country where concerned were Syria, Afghanistan, and therefore Ma'at Foundation would like to propose to the General Secretariat and to the member states that we have regular or semi-regular reports every half year or every 3 months that shows the relative estimations of the movement of weapons and diversion, and we would like to increase the efforts in order to build capacities of the civil society organizations that are working in monitoring and estimating such movement of weapons, and based on these reports that can be sent to the Secretariat or the member states, which would help to know how much these countries are abiding with the treaty. Thank you for having provided me with an opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your intervention. Now the floor to delegation of Costa Rica, followed by delegation of Cameroon, please.
Good morning. It's the first time I take the floor. I would therefore like to congratulate the chair, Mr. Ambassador Cohel, as well as the different facilitators of the working groups and the Secretariat for our work. Costa Rica would like to thank Ms. Stella Petrovich as well for all the documents we have received on the role of countries in the transit and transshipment to prevent deviation. And my country believes that we must guarantee that exports of arms not be used to guarantee or fuel conflicts, facilitate terrorism, or carry out violations of human rights or IHL. As an importing country, a transit and transshipment country, which is not allowed to manufacture arms or other weapons, we see that in the document we talk about the shared responsibility also of the exporting state on the different measures that they can adopt with the transshipment and transit countries in order to prevent diversion during a transfer. In order to strengthen this issue, we would like to bring our observations, Ms. Facilitator, in the next few days in order to strengthen on the strengthening of our control system since 2018. Since then, we have seen many cases of diversion prior to the transit or during transit. And I would like to briefly mention one that happened in Costa Rica, whereby an air transit request was denied on the basis of Article 6.3 and 7.24 of the treaty, and how we reacted in Costa Rica on this. In March 2018, the National Director of Armament received a request to authorize an air transit of a container of arms coming from a European country and which had as a destination another Central American country. The exporter was a firearms manufacturer known for producing the VHS model, which are a type of assault rifle used in international missions, and which final destination was an importer, a Central American importer of ammunition. In our control center with the Ministry of Security and the Minister of Interior, we analyzed the risk, in particular with regards to Article 6 and 7 of the treaty, and we also carried out preventative measure which saw differences between the dates of arrival and the dates of authorization. We therefore refused that transit that wanted to use the Limon harbor, because we cannot allow the transit of arms to a third country using Costa Rica. In particular, because the intelligence and public information we knew of the vulnerability and instability situation of the destination country, and this has led that in the country a moratorium of transit in Costa Rica be maintained. As a conclusion, we would like to strengthen the importance of the value we give that in the document we analyze the role of cooperation and exchange of information between the involved countries during transfer. And this is important because that follow-up role is extremely important to avoid that arms go into the wrong hands and continue strengthening or reinforcing violence in the other countries. And as Mexico has already said, the role that arms have in increasing violence in our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Costa Rica, for your overview. Your paper on measures and your comments is very welcomed, and you may share it with us through the Secretariat. We very appreciate your engagement in this sense. Thank you very much. I'm giving the floor to Cameroon. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank you for giving me the floor once again. As you know, we spoke yesterday. The delegation of Cameroon would like to thank once again the organizers of this first phase of the preparatory work prior to CSP8, specifically in the context of the sponsorship program, which we have benefited from. Thank you also to Madame Stella Petkovic for the excellent work that she has done regarding the work on Article 11 relating to diversion. On this question of transit and transshipment, well, Cameroon expressed certain views yesterday and alluded to the entities that are involved in managing transit and transshipment in our country. On the question of the role of transit and transshipment states in preventing diversion, well, in our case, we can say that we have abided by the decisions taken by the Security Council of the United Nations under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, in particular arms embargo. All cases of embargo are respected by Cameroon. Ms. Petrovic, no weapons transit via Cameroon, and through Resolution 2588 of July 2021, the Security Council of the UN has decided to extend by 1 year the embargo of weapons imposed upon the Central African Republic, and certainly Cameroon has respected fully this decision. It's very important because this makes it possible to prevent diversion. There is a very thorough examination of the weapons that are examined by the customs authorities. We have various units, anti-traffic units in the airports in particular, created by presidential decree of October 2014. And the cargoes are systematically checked using a scanner. We can also note that the cargoes that are transiting in our country are also accompanied by a mixed escort of security forces and customs officials, according to measures that have been strictly defined by the various authorities. These cargoes are tracked also by geolocation systematically. It is also important to note that Cameroon experiences a number of difficulties in logistical terms as regards controls that are carried out at borders. All of the border points are not necessarily equipped with the necessary equipment to carry out these checks. The exchange of information, of course, is of the utmost importance. It would be very important that the transit countries be aware of the transport before it actually takes place. Cameroon encourages the initiative of the Forum of Exchange of Information relating to diversion and would like to know how to access this forum and also what is the level of information that should be shared. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for your comment and for the information shared. Now I'm giving the floor to delegation of Ghana, followed by the delegation of the Republic of France. Please.
Thank you very much, Madam Facilitator, for giving us the floor. On the lighter side, I want to congratulate you and your team for the work you've done so far in coming up with a multi-year work plan and the various documents you've also shared with us. Surprisingly, we are much excited about the fact that previous facilitator has also been a woman. And we congratulate the Secretariat and the chairs for putting our gender issues in perspective. Madam Facilitator, it is important to note that diversion of our conventional arms is at the heart of the Arms Trade Treaty and its implementation. We are making some general comments and will eventually provide with some specific comments on some of the questions you've circulated. But just to emphasize the need or the important role the national point of contact have to play, especially in the exchange of information regarding arms. The delegation from Switzerland has indicated that in their case, they are likely to contact national point of contact to facilitate certain exchange of information regarding shipments that they found that are not in line with their national regulations. That shows how important national points of contact will play in facilitating this exchange of information regarding shipment of arms. In this regard, the delegation of Ghana would like to stress the need for the Secretariat to consider developing some guidelines in line with the guidelines that they hope to develop on a mechanism of sharing information when it comes to issues of shipment of arms and all that. I thank you very much, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you for your comment. Now I'm giving the floor to the delegation of the Republic of France, please.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. I would like to thank you for the work that you have undertaken, and also thank you for the documents that you have sent to us so that we can prepare for this meeting. As regards to the work program that you have suggested, appears to us to be totally relevant, both with respect to the prevention of diversion during the transfer of weapons, but also with respect to the examination of the role that the private sector and civil society can play in terms of preventing diversion. This last point is particularly important in our opinion. France recalled several times during the preparatory work, and as you know, we also organized a dedicated event when CSP8 was held in 2019. We would also like to say that we believe that this forum on the exchange of information in the area of diversion is a very useful tool, totally relevant in the context of the treaty and achieving its objectives. As regards the role played by transit and transshipment states, well, there's a document that is particularly rich and comprehensive in our opinion. As previous speakers have said, I have various observations to make on the basis of France's practices in this area in order to contribute to fruitful exchanges amongst us today. As regards the control of transit and transshipment activities, aims at a dual objective under the treaty: regulate the international trade in conventional weapons and prevent the illicit diversion of arms that are illegally exported. And to reach these two objectives, we have to make secure all of the transfer chain, and we have to be able to track more closely the itinerary of weapons, especially during the transit phase. The role of transit countries in fighting arms trafficking is crucial. Such organizations try to dissimulate some information, in particular the details of the exporting and importing country. As your document recalls, Madam Facilitator, various measures can be undertaken by transit countries to reduce the risk of diversion during a transfer. According to us, these measures are threefold. First of all, upstream measures, a priori. The states could demand the communication of information relating to the transit or transshipment operation that is contemplated. This information, according to us, should be comprehensive as possible. It should make it possible for transit countries to be able to identify the various actors who are involved in the operation: the shipper, the recipient, the transit country, the freight forwarder where applicable, and to know exactly where the weapons come from and where they're going to, as well as the entry points and exit points of the national territory. It is also necessary to specify the type and quantity of weapons under consideration. The states can also set in place a prior authorization system. This is the choice that France has made. An authorization for the transit of war weapons is required for a certain number of operations. The requests for such authorizations are based on a form that has to be filled in, and there is some very significant information has to appear. This authorization accompanies the material during the transport from France and has to be presented upon request. This is a very important element to facilitate checks. Another element that is important, in our opinion, is that the authorizations may be modified, suspended, modified, or withdrawn. It makes it possible to take into account the evolution of international export and new priorities that might be linked to national security, or according to the implementation of arms embargoes by the international community and other measures, including regional organizations of which France is a member. Secondly, the control of physical flows of their customs play a crucial role. These checks by customs can be done at several stages, at the entry and exit point of the territory, but also when these goods are moving across the territory. This can be the check of the conformity of the documents that are presented, and the authorities authorizations that are delivered, and there can even be the seizure of cargoes. What is essential here is that the customs have the necessary financial and human resources. It is also important that they have the necessary power that enables them to carry out their mission. In particular, when we're talking about transport means, the tracking of weapons, or also to check whether there has been a violation or not. And then there is the question of the operators. It is very important to strengthen the control of those who are involved in transshipment operations. In France, requests for transit or transshipment can be drawn up only by those who are officially recognized as an official operator. It is also very important to check that there's good cooperation with these operators, so they must be made aware of the measures that apply as regards weapons trade, and they also have to be encouraged to develop compliance measures. Madam Facilitator, these different measures should make it possible to prevent diversion during the transit and transshipment phase. We would like to thank you once again for all the efforts that you have undertaken and for having made possible this discussion where we can exchange very useful views with our various partners on this very important topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very detailed intervention. Now I'm giving the floor to the delegation of People's Republic of China, followed by Belgium. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. First of all, I would like to thank the chairs of the working group and the facilitators for advancing the work. I thank you for your efforts. China attaches great importance to the implementation of Article 11. In this regard, we have adopted active measures to prevent illicit diversion of arms. We use a qualification system dedicated to the sales of military items, which means only companies authorized by the government can export military products. Furthermore, from the phase of negotiation with foreign parties, contract execution to shipment, every step must be approved by the government. China only trades with sovereign countries in conventional military products and never with non-state actors. China explicitly requires the government of recipient countries to provide the end user and end-use certificates, and they commit not to transfer to a third-party arms imported from China without approval from China. These policies and practices help lower the risk of diversion of arms exported by China. We believe that the prevention of diversion is also determined by the kind of control regimes and practices the importing countries have. Even with strict scrutiny by the export countries, the risk of diversion of arms still exists. In this regard, importing countries must fulfill their commitments in adopting efficient measures to prevent illicit diversion. Countries should also strengthen information exchange and law enforcement cooperation to address the problem appropriately. China stands ready to enhance exchange and cooperation with all parties to contribute to solve the problem of diversion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now the floor is, I'm giving the floor to Belgium, please.
Thank you, Stella, and good afternoon. Thank you also and the Secretariat for the paper that you provided. I will go into a few specific points in that. I assume that I can address the three parts of the paper all at once. The first part I wanted to go into is in the second part, I think, where it talks about maintaining open communication and cooperation between government agencies domestically. I think that that is a very important point on which we should maybe elaborate a bit more. I say that also because in our own country, we are currently looking into that a bit more and trying to identify all agencies on the national level that are somehow involved in transit control, in transportation control, and to see which kind of useful information they would have that could feed into a transit risk management system that should detect or monitor potential shipments that might not be complying with the legislation. And I think that our subgroup, but also the subgroup on transit and transshipment could also play a role in that. Yesterday, we were talking also a little bit about the same topic. And at the end, the facilitator asked us to, as much as possible, share also our national practices by written comments. And in that, I think it would be very useful if states could focus also on that aspect of which kind of agencies in their country are involved in transit control, transportation control, and what kind of useful information that they could share with one another in order to have an effective risk management system. I mean, in our own country, we are looking at, obviously, the customs authorities, the licensing office, but also other agencies like port authorities or public safety agencies. Sometimes they also have useful information. So to be able to map that within this working group and or the transit working group, I think would be very useful. Another aspect that I wanted to address was the awareness raising and due diligence requirements towards logistical actors like freight forward, shipping agents, and so forth. I think also France already went into that. But what we have done, in fact, is imposed on those kind of actors that want to be involved in transit and transshipment of conventional weapons, even before that they would be eligible to apply for specific transit or transshipment licenses, to obtain prior authorization of our licensing office. That is basically a bit like a reliability label that they get. And there we are really going to assess whether they have the knowledge and the means to comply specifically with the rules that are applicable on export and transit controls. The next and the last issue that I wanted to address was obviously the information exchange between states. I very much appreciate, obviously, as the chair of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum, for the prominent reference to the DIF in this document. And I can only say, obviously, that it is the mechanism within the ATT framework where the kind of information that we've been talking about here can and should be served. Also, because that can feed into your national transit risk management. And for that reason, I can only call on all states to actually do that. It's still unclear when the first actual meeting of the DIF will be able to take place in April or in August. There's also already the information exchange portal that is available for that. But in any case, for the next meetings of the DIF, I think that state should think about the potential cases of diversion during the transit phase that they can share there. Because when you're going to look, and in that I also want to address the question I think that was posed by Cameroon, as in what kind of information we would share. First and foremost, that would be operational information about detected or prevented cases of diversion, but also the information that is expressly listed in the terms of reference of the DIF. And concerning this issue, I think that elements such as trafficking routes, methods of concealment, common points of dispatch are those that are extremely relevant concerning transit. So I hope that when we will have that meeting of the DIF, specifically this kind of information on the transit and transshipment phase might also be shared in that regard. I forgot to say at the beginning, because there was also a question about the document of possible measures to prevent and address diversion, and to what extent that should be updated. I think also for this, it's already a very good document, and I would also then encourage everyone when thinking about these questions to go back to that and already apply what is in there, because it's a very good paper. But I started then by referring to the national interagency cooperation. That is maybe then the one aspect that also in that context could maybe get a bit more attention in our future discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your comments, and we noted everything. Especially thank you that you are speaking from the position of chair of Diversion Information Exchange Forum. I hope that there will be a lot of space to extend discussion and raise some questions through the work of forum. So thank you. Now I'm giving the floor to Control Arms, followed by delegation of Zambia, please.
Well, and thank you very much. Control Arms welcomes this opportunity to address how transit and transshipment states can prevent diversion. And we would like to thank you, Madam Facilitator, for preparing the background paper for this working group, which provides a thoughtful and useful starting point for this important discussion. We really appreciate the participation in today's discussion by states from a range of regions and learning of their different experiences in working to prevent diversion. Following up on a point made by Switzerland on the risk of diversion through the airspace, we wish to underline that diversion is not only a risk en route in the territory of states where the goods are transiting or transshipped, as described in the background paper, but can also occur in international waters and airspace. We very much appreciate the comment of Côte d'Ivoire that perfection in preventing diversion is difficult to achieve, but there are fundamental elements that all states need to implement. As indicated in the background paper, efforts to address legal and practical challenges to preventing diversion of arms in transit begin with states adopting and maintaining a transparent legal and regulatory framework governing this area. This should include provisions which give the relevant state authorities the power to interdict, inspect, seize and dispose of or /destroy diverted arms shipments if necessary. However, the effectiveness of national measures to prevent diversion in transit will be limited if states do not have timely access to accurate information relating to arms shipments transiting or being transshipped through their jurisdiction. Exporting states should require their exporters to provide them with information on all the parties to an arms transfer and the intended transportation route as soon as this is known, ideally at the licensing stage. This information should then be shared promptly with transit and transshipment and importing states. Subsequently, should any material changes occur, the details should be speedily transmitted to the affected states. Control Arms also recognises that the investigation, interdiction and seizure of shipments, especially through transiting busy trade routes, can be challenging. While Article 9 of the ATT does not oblige states parties to search every shipment passing through their jurisdiction, they must be in a position to do so and to take action in the event that a consignment is in breach of ATT Article 6. States parties must also consider how they will ensure that the seized weapons are securely impounded and can be safely disposed of if required. For some states, these requirements may well pose capacity and logistical challenges. Accordingly, it is vital that they seek assistance and that states in a position to provide help make this known. The focus on all actors involved in the transfer chain is much welcomed. All actors have a role to play in preventing diversion. States and the private sector must work closely together and routinely share information concerning arms transfers. Ongoing awareness raising is needed on identifying the risks of diversion and measures to address the problem should it arise. This should include outreach to the private sector, including, for example, transporters and freight forwarders, so that they can be alert to diversion risks and ensure that any suspicious circumstances are reported promptly to state authorities. We strongly support the calls by Ghana and Switzerland for the sharing of national focal points. Control Arms further recommends that states parties explore the possibility of routine and timely sharing of information on transport providers and routes among exporting, transit and importing states for arms shipments, potentially with a role for the ATT Secretariat as the repository and clearinghouse for that information. Similar to Belgium and Switzerland, we see clear value in the proposal that the Diversion Information Exchange Forum exchanges could include diversion experiences in the transit phase. However, it must be recognised that the nature of the DEF, meeting in person a maximum of twice a year, limiting access to a small number of stakeholders and dealing with only with cases of particular concern, serves a very different purpose to that of a broader information sharing mechanism. Finally, we look forward to continuing discussions on this important topic and to the sharing of lessons learned and good practices in preventing the diversion of arms in transit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm now giving the floor to delegation of Zambia, please.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much once more again for this wonderful background paper on the role of transit and transshipment states in preventing diversion. Like Switzerland has already stated, it might be easy to detect and control diversion through land, especially for countries like mine, which is land-linked. But for control of diversion through air, this is a bit of a challenge, especially in our region, because you find that there are some weak mechanisms detecting on what the aircraft transiting through your airspace is carrying. So this entails that there should be a need for information exchange, starting from the exporting country and also the country where the plane is landing and offloading the arms. So this information is very cardinal, so that by the time it is being transported by either road or rail through our countries, we have concrete information that should correspond with what the cargo is really carrying. So this means there should be really enhanced means of information exchange. And also we request that because of some weak mechanism that some countries have, especially in the control of airspaces, maybe there should be more need for more exchange of best practices so that we are able to also take leave and put into place such mechanism in order to make sure that we evade the diversion of arms through the air. And also, we are aware that in the region, for example, the issue of brokers, the control of brokers, is very cardinal. I remember we had a workshop some 2-3 years ago regarding the control of brokers in the region, and it was shocking to find that very few countries had put in place some legal mechanisms to control brokers, as we are aware that brokers, some, especially the illicit ones, might be a source of diversion itself, either through maybe arrangement of transportation. So it's very important that also we look at the issue of how, for example, some countries can put in place the mechanism to control these brokers, because many of the brokers being used for purchase of arms or for transportation of these arms are not domiciled in our countries, but outside. So to really ascertain who is legit or illegitimate, it takes a bit of time, and hence also the need for information exchange so that we rule out who might be involved in trying to facilitate the diversion of arms. So this was my short intervention, Madam. Thank you.
I would like to thank the delegate of Zambia for the intervention, and now I'm giving the floor to Sierra Leone, followed by Germany, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Madam Facilitator, for giving me the floor. I also want to thank you for putting this document together and sending it to us. It shows that work is being done in the right direction. I also want to appreciate the Secretariat for bringing diverse views in order to enrich this document. The issue of diversion remains very much topical and critical to the protection and safety of all. As a country that has gone through 11 years civil conflicts, I believe we understand the dangers of diversion. As the ATT is a legally binding instrument, in order to become fully compliant, Sierra Leone has made significant strides to ensure that the treaty is given force in our national laws. A thought-provoking question for Sierra Leone, as well as for every state party, is to therefore assess whether this can be best achieved by amending existing legislation or through a new law, which will in itself then probably require adjustments to other existing law. Sierra Leone is in a useful position whereby, with only a relatively small number of changes to our national law, which is the Arms and Ammunition Act, to the Sierra Leone National Commission on Small Arms Act 2010, and potentially to some other laws and regulations. For example, the Custom Act 2011 national legislation can be largely compliant with all the requirements of the ATT. It is strongly believed that the Arms and Ammunition Act should be the primary legislative instrument through which the ATT is enacted and implemented at national level. The AA was established to provide for the control of the transfer of small arms and light weapons, their ammunitions and other related materials from or through Sierra Leone, to provide for the regulation of the manufacture of small arms and light weapons, to provide for institutional and operational capacities to regulate possession and use of small arms and light weapons within Sierra Leone, and to provide for other related matters. The principal mismatch between the purpose and existing powers of the AAA and the requirements of the ATT is with regard to scope. In one respect, the ambit of the ATT is wider than that of the Arms and Ammunition Act, while in other respects it is narrower. Wider in that, whereas the AAA applies only to small arms and light weapons and their ammunitions, the ATT is much broader, covering from small arms up to major conventional weapons, platforms and systems such as fighter, aircraft, tanks, and armored vehicles. In that, the ATT deals only with international transfers, taking to exclude exports, import, brokering, transit shipments. The AA, by contrast, in addition to controlling international transfers of small arms and light weapons, also regulate, for example, their domestic sale and transfer, manufacture, ownership, possession, and use, along with small arms and light weapons stockpile management. The primary task, therefore, is to expand the scope of the Arms and Ammunition Act so that part of dealing with transfer is amended to include other conventional arms and ammunitions. The ATT, it has been observed that while the ATT does address all kinds of arms transfer, and transfer is defined in Article 2 of the treaty as exports, imports, transit shipments, and brokering, it is central focus on exports. It does, however, have articles explicitly regulating imports, transit or transshipment, and brokering. Although each of these contain caveats, such as where necessary and feasible, transit or transshipment, and pursuant to national laws, which has led some to assume that these provisions are therefore discretionary. However, when considering alongside Article 6, which deals with prohibited transfers, for example, where for the transfer will violate a UN arms embargo or be used in the commission of genocide, these obligations to control import, transit, transshipment, and brokering are mandatory rather than optional or contingent. State parties must therefore have the legislation and procedure in place to regulate these activities where the relevant circumstances apply. Sierra Leone is in a fortunate position. Sierra Leone, therefore, is in a fortunate position that is already the case for small arms and light weapons, ammunition, and related materials through the AAA. Extending this to meet the obligations in the ATT can be managed through relatively minor amendments to our own national legislation. With regards to transits at national level in Sierra Leone, all ships docking are required to provide a national revenue authority with full cargo manifest in advance, which will assist Sierra Leone in meeting its obligations. The NRA should alert the license authority whenever the cargo manifest shows there are conventional military items on board, at which point the authority can consider whether those arms fall foul of Article 6, and in the event they do, order customs to detain the cargo. Other area where clarification and elaboration may be necessary is with regards to armed brokering. The current definition of brokering needs to be tightened, while the existing reference to the AAA to require those involved in brokering to register their operations needs to be expanded. This is my submission, Madam Facilitator. Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra Leone, for your intervention. Now, Germany has the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. Referring to Article 11, I would like to mention that post-shipment controls and post-delivery verifications, respectively, are relatively new but highly relevant components of Germany's national control system. We think PSCs are a very good tool to prevent diversion. Germany is of the opinion that PSCs have become also more important internationally during the past few years. Publications on PSCs, such as those published by CSP8 in 2020 on European approaches to PSCs, and CSP8's policy brief in December 2021 titled Post-Shipment On-Site Inspections of Military Material, Challenges and Responses, seem to confirm a growing international market for knowledge and experience regarding PSCs. That is why Germany decided to make PSCs one of the major subjects to be dealt with during the presidency of the ATT. Please let me underline that Germany's kind of advertisement for PSCs should not be taken as an attempt to impose PSCs on other states' parties. However, we are of the opinion that PSCs can be a very useful tool, not only to strengthen the confidence between exporting and importing countries, but also to improve existing national export control systems. Having said that, I would like to mention yesterday's workshop on PSCs with Germany, supported by Switzerland, offered as a side event to Prep Meet 1. Some 75 participants took part in the workshop, and we are grateful for the very useful contributions made by Mexico, by Spain, by France, by Korea, and by others. Yesterday's workshop will be followed by a second side event regarding PSCs on the occasion of Prep Meet 2 in April. I would like to invite not only states parties, but also representatives of the civil society, as well as organizations and institutes active in ATT-related matters to take part in the side event on PSCs in April. As the panelists of yesterday's workshop had the impression that many questions, e.g. regarding PSC's basic principles and the practice of PSCs, could not be answered due to time limits, I would like to offer interested states parties to contact our colleague, Mr. Axel Kricko, at bafa.bund.de for requests and suggestions. I can promise that any input will be used by Germany to make the next workshop useful for everyone interested in PSCs. Please find Mr. Kricko's mail ID in the chat. Thank you, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you for all information shared. All are well noted here. Now I'm giving the floor to delegation of Argentina, please.
Muchas gracias, señora facilitadora.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, my delegation would like to congratulate you on your role as a facilitator of such an important subgroup, and you can count on my delegation's support. My delegation would like to thank as well the fact that in the different deliberations of this meeting, we focus on the role of transshipment in the prevention of diversion, as well as the role of the private sector and the civil society on this issue. On this aspect, Argentina would like to say that part of its national practice, notifications to the receiving state of the material once that the authorization for export is issued. This authorization is issued by the National Agency of Controlled Material of Argentina, ANMAC, which carries out a verification of the import information, and the notification to the receiving state is done after the material has left the country through the Argentinian embassies in place. This mechanism, as we have said, is part of our national practice and is carried out in a spirit of increasing trust and giving trustworthy information in order to avoid diversion. My delegation, Ms. Facilitator, is available for any other delegations who would be interested in knowing the system that Argentina is implementing and to share best practices to avoid diversion. Thank you very much. Once again, please give interpreters all statements, written statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. Now we have two more delegations who would like to make interventions, and I think we are finishing just on time. So I'm giving the floor to delegation of Georgia, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I want to thank Ms. Stella for giving me the floor. I want to thank ATT Secretariat for organizing this preparatory meeting. I would like to share the best practices of Georgia with you. While issuing the transit licenses, the main aim of the state is to mitigate the risk of diversion. For this reason, all the needed documents are required. It may be contract of sale, contract of carriage, import license issued in the export country, and export license issued in the import country, end user certificate and invoice. If the prices which are written in the invoice are not relevant to the goods which must be in the carriage, we may apply to the intelligence agencies or international organizations. And in the case of fixing a gap, transit license will be denied, and it may become a case of investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. Now the floor has Mexico, please.
Thank you, Ms. Facilitator, for giving us the floor. My delegation would like to recognize the advances and progress made by this subgroup in the very important analysis and the different measures to fight diversion, not only before, during, but also after the transit and transfer of arms. And in particular, I would like to congratulate us for deliberating on the role of the private sector to avoid diversion. Regionally speaking, Latin America and the Caribbean have seen in recent years an increase in violent deaths compared to other areas where conflict crises are open. And we believe that more than 80% of the violence in the region is done with firearms, and this increases the violence against women or other vulnerable groups. On the basis of this context, Article 11 of the ATT gives us a solid base so that member states can cooperate and collaborate to fight against the diversion of small and light weapons as well as ammunition in the region, and hence contribute to ending violence, empowering criminal associations, and above anything else to stop the very negative effects of these crises in our social cohesion and the possibility of personal development of our populations. And in this regard, and taking into account the importance for our delegation, it's important to evaluate the role of other non-state actors to mitigate the risks of diversion of the trade of web arms. And in particular, Mexico has carried out legal action that could inform our deliberations on diversion and the consequences that this diversion can have on the organized crime. If we take into account that in the Forum on Diversion will be focusing on this issue on the basis of the collaboration of different authorities in very concrete cases, Mexico would like to say that the only limit that we have on national legislation on the exchange of information in the framework of this forum is based on open criminal investigations. Finally, my delegation would like to recognize the wonderful job carried out by Ms. Stella Pretovic on the presentation of the basic document. Mexico will continue supporting this work towards our next conference of the parties, and would like to thank Serbia for their support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. Now I'm giving the floor for the second time to delegation of Ghana, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, once again. I taking the floor to give you a regional dimension of how prevention of diversion can also be taken into consideration. Yesterday, I gave a vivid description of how ECOWAS member states deal with the issue of transfer of weapons, transfer of arms, especially small arms and light weapons, the ammunition within the region. And as I indicated yesterday, the transfer of small arms and light weapons within the ECOWAS region is banned. And before a state can be able to transfer any small arms and light weapons within the sub-region, you need an exemption certificate issued by the ECOWAS Secretariat. And this will be after all member states have not raised any objection against the transfer of the weapons into the particular country. It is also good to note that that measure brings to fore the highest form of transparency because every state in ECOWAS knows what every state in ECOWAS is buying or is procuring in terms of arms. So before a state in ECOWAS takes delivery of weapons, every state or every country in ECOWAS knows about it. So if the arms are transiting through another country, the country is already aware before the weapons or the arms comes in. If you are not too sure at the point of entry of any weapon consignment, one of the main ways is to cross-check with the ECOWAS Secretariat on the documentation that has been issued. So one of the documents that you look out for is the exemption certificate that has been issued by the ECOWAS Secretariat. You contact ECOWAS Secretariat to verify whether the exemption certificate that has been issued is authentic. Because of the phenomenon of commissions, that is national commissions on small arms, which were largely established as a result of the ECOWAS Convention on Small Arms, exchange of information is also quite swift. You could also verify with other colleagues from other small arms commissions on whether the transaction is aware of, the country is aware of the transaction, and that this can largely prevent a diversion of arms. We have witnessed within the sub-region, if I'm not mistaken, almost zero diversion of arms being transferred within the sub-region because of the principle of the exemption regime that we are employing. What we have seen actually is a diversion of official state stockpiles and stockpiles or weapons that enter legally and eventually are found in the illegal market. This is an area that we in the region hope engage further countries on how to address this. We hope to also see the modalities involved under the ATT in addressing the leakage or the diversion of official stake stockpiles. I thank you, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you, Gano, for your comment. Having in mind that we already use all available time for this session, I would like to thank the delegates who participated to today's meeting. I would especially like to thank for all interventions and comments. All comments and interventions were very valuable, and we very appreciate your engagement in this sense. We noted all your comments and suggestions, and we will take all comments into consideration for the future work of this sub-working group. Despite a limited time, I hope that we reached the goal of today's session, and we are going to, of course, to continue discussion during the April's meeting, which will focus on the role of private sector and civil society in mitigating the risk of diversion. Once again, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we have now concluded the first part of today's session on diversion. We are now going to proceed straight to the second part of this session, and we will have the working group on treaty universalization to facilitate the next session. I therefore invite the President of our conference, in his capacity as the co-chair of the working group on treaty universalization, to move forward. I suppose also the other co-chair, the president of the 7th Conference of States Parties, Ambassador Kiberi, to also move forward in their capacities as the co-chairs. Thank you so much.
So, yes, thank you to the Secretariat and Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to welcome you to this first meeting of the Working Group of Treaty Unionization during this CSP8 cycle here in the room and all around the globe, whatever time it is. So, as you know, the working group was established at the 3rd Conference of State Parties in 2007 with a mandate of leading the process of harmonizing thoughts and ideas on the issue of treaty universalization with a view to determining the best approaches for taking this issue forward. The preamble section of the treaty emphasizes the desirability of achieving universal adherence to this treaty and in advancing the mandate of the working group on treaty universalization. It is essential for ATT stakeholders to exchange views on a continuous basis on effective approaches to promote universality of the treaty. So the working group co-chairs have prepared and circulated a draft agenda to guide the working group discussions for today. Draft agenda covers the following items. So first item, opening of the meeting, where we are in the middle of it. Item number 2 would be the update on presidency activities to promote universalization of the ATT. Agenda item 3, an update on the working group universalization co-chairs activities to promote universalization of the ATT. This we have swapped with item 4 for just for practical purposes, so that we would come under item 4 to the ATT Secretariat update on the status of ratifications and accessions. Agenda item 5 will be then the update on efforts by states to promote the universalization of ATT. And the final agenda item number 6, so civil society and industry efforts to promote the universalization of ATT. So with this slide adjustment I just indicated, I take it that participants accept the draft agenda as the basis for our work this afternoon. So thank you. So distinguished delegates, without further delay, let me inform you how Ursula Givry and myself plan to facilitate today's discussions. We have agreed that I will moderate the session this afternoon, and I will then invite my co-chair, Ursula Givry, to make his intervention under agenda item 3, spelling out the efforts of the former presidency and the co-chair with regard of the universalization of the treaty. So, having confirmed the order of our business today, I would like to proceed directly to agenda item 2 and give an update on the activities undertaken under the CSP8 presidency in promoting the universalization of the treaty since the assumption of office immediately after CSP7. I will be joined in this endeavor by my colleague Rainer Schmiedchen from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Berlin, who will come in right after me. So let me start. Since coming into office, the presidency has undertaken the following activities related to treaty universalization. First, we facilitated the preparation and processing of 2021 ATT resolution during the first committee of the United Nations General Assembly. This resolution was voted in favor by 151 states, with no votes against it. The result in the General Assembly even surpassed this with 162 votes in favor and no vote against the resolution. We see this as a strong signal and political support for the treaty, but we are cognizant that we need to keep up the momentum to reach out to those states that abstained. However, it is clear that we are far beyond the 110 member states who have voted in favor of the ATT resolution. Let me now turn to the aspects that guided us during the decision making regarding the geographical focus of the universalization efforts of our presidency. We will hear later this afternoon the Secretariat with a briefing on the regional distribution of state parties to the ATT, and we'll see that there is a clear underrepresentation in the Asia-Pacific region, which is why we took this as our geographical focus. However, working for universality means a universal approach. And besides this focus, we are certainly engaging also beyond this very specific region. So at this stage, as I already announced, I would like to give the floor to the head of division of the export control, the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Rainer Schmiedchen, who will introduce the process that started in January with a view to promote the universalization of our treaty. So, Rainer, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Thanks so much. As an initiative of the German presidency for the CSP8 cycle, and with regard to the universalization of the ATT, a démarche action took place at the end of January and the beginning of February in 17 countries. In the focus of the démarche were mainly those states which had signed the ATT in 2013 and 2014 already, namely Angola, Bahrain, Bangladesh, Haiti, Cambodia, Colombia, Malaysia, Mongolia, the Philippines, Singapore, Tanzania, Thailand, Ukraine, United Arab Emirates, as well as India, Indonesia, and Pakistan, which hitherto do not belong to the signatory states. In preparation of the démarches, German diplomatic missions in Abu Dhabi, Bangkok, Dar es Salaam, Dhaka, Bogota, Islamabad, Jakarta, Luanda, Kiev, Kuala Lumpur, Manama, Manila, New Delhi, Phnom Penh, Port-au-Prince, Singapore, and Ulaanbaatar joined hands with their counterparts of the respective EU delegations, as well as with the embassies of Australia, Belgium, Canada, China, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Italy, Japan, Korea, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Portugal, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. It goes without saying that not all the aforementioned states' missions could join the démarches, but all in all, the large number of states parties participating in the démarches is an impressive example for the state parties' willingness to universalize the ATT. Furthermore, the démarches have shown a very good team spirit amongst the diplomatic missions of the ATT states parties abroad. And please allow me to add that in some cases, it was really touching to see how our colleagues managed to circumvent difficulties caused by the pandemic, e.g. to speak in video conference formats with representatives of their respective host countries. I am afraid that a comprehensive analysis of the démarches results will need more time. However, I would like to mention 3 observations which were made similarly in several countries. First, countries which hitherto did not accede to the ATT seem to be puzzled by the fact that other countries in their respective region have not yet ratified the ATT. A kind of negative role model effect of other states not becoming state parties should not be underestimated. Second, some of the states that have hitherto only signed the ATT might need support and more information respectively with regard to the cost necessary to become and to remain a state party, and with regard to reporting obligations of ATT state parties. Third, nearly all states' representatives which the démarche team spoke to underlined the general commitment of their governments with regard to the overall aims of the ATT, regardless of being a state party or not. This is a very encouraging news, I think. Please let me conclude by thanking all state parties' embassy teams abroad for joining the démarches in 17 states and the respective capitals and the External Action Service of the EU for supporting the preparation of the démarches. I assume that one or the other government might become a state party to the ATT soon, perhaps even encouraged by our joint démarche action. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Rainer. Thank you to Berlin. Thank you for this comprehensive briefing and the state of play. This is an issue which will be carried on. It's clear also, and we will give an update at the next PrepCom meetings. But my question is, would any delegation like to take this floor at this time? This is okay. The state of Palestine, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The State of Palestine expresses its appreciation for the work of the co-chairs of the Working Group on Treaty Universalization. The State of Palestine supports all outreach activities to promote the universalization of the ATT, leading to a progressive growth in the number of states to 110 states. However, the State of Palestine recalls its concern that a number of major arms exporters and importers are not yet party to the treaty and calls upon them to do so, as responsible arms transfers represents a humanitarian imperative and is an essential step towards maintaining international peace and security. In this regard, the State of Palestine encourages considering the MENA region as a priority when conducting universalization activities for the CSP8 process. We have the honor that State of Palestine is the first state in the Middle East to accede the Arms Trade Treaty at a time where our region is engulfed with conflicts and especially State of Palestine is suffering from colonial illegal occupation. We had the honor to coordinate a meeting between the president of the 5th Conference of States Parties and officials representing many states of our region and stand ready to contribute towards universalizing the treaty in our region. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished delegate from the State of Palestine for his statement. Is there any other demand for the floor? I see Argentina. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. We'd like to congratulate both the co-chairs of the Working Group on Universalization. You can count on Argentina to work with you in favor of this cause. We participated as co-chair in this working group during the last conference, that is during the 7th CSP. A moment which coincided with the second semester of 2021 when we chaired pro tempore the Mercosur, the working group on fire weapons and munitions of state parties of Mercosur and associates also met during that second semester, and which includes all South American states. We'd like to highlight that during the 38th meeting of this Mercosur working group, which took place in November of 2021, Argentina included an item on the agenda relative to the ATT. And under that item, we urged state parties to accede or ratify the ATT. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Argentina. I propose if there is no immediate statement concerning what we've just heard about the efforts of the German presidency, I would propose that we move on before to item 3, where I would like to invite my co-chair, Ambassador Gabri, to update this meeting about the efforts undertaken by Sierra Leone in its capacity as co-chair of the working group to promote universalization. I would like to invite you, Ambassador, to brief us. Yes, you have the floor, please.
I thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you. It gives me great pleasure, as usual, to meet with you again. and to continue working on universalization of the treaty, now with His Excellency Ambassador Gobel. I'm particularly pleased to learn of the use of the extensive network of Germany around the world to start real work in terms of promoting universalization in several parts of the world, particularly in the Pacific region. I thank you, Excellency, for that effort. Sierra Leone, as I said, remains firmly committed to strengthening the ATT, including through increasing the number of states parties fully committed to the treaty. We firmly believe that the widely endorsed and implemented ATT has the potential to evolve into one of the most important normative initiatives supporting global efforts to prevent illicit trade in conventional arms. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me update you on some of the activities we have since undertaken to promote the universalization of the ATT as co-chairs of the WGTU. It is a fairly modest effort, but we will continue advancing on some of what we've been doing. Building on the momentum generated during our presidency, we have stayed in close contact with states that we are considered during the time of our presidency to be close to joining the treaty based on advancements they have made at the national level, including by conducting bilateral follow-up meetings. As a result of our engagement, the Gambia is now undertaking the necessary processes to seek approval for accession and is on track to join the treaty by CSP8. Remember, the Gambia is the only country in West Africa still not a member of the ATT. To this end, Gambia is working with key implementing partners to acquire the required resources and technical expertise to ensure its timely accession. Notably, the Gambia has submitted a project to the VTF, Voluntary Trust Fund, on assessing and preparing for ATT implementation compliance. As you know, the WTF is a key mechanism to ensure states that haven't got the resources to have the necessary resources to effectively implement the treaty. In this regard, I'm grateful to those state parties serving on the VTF committee and those that provide financial assistance to this important multilateral fund in support of treaty universalization and implementation. In the past few weeks, my delegation consulted with another African country that has shown great interest in joining the treaty, including by sending a high-level delegation to participate as an observer in CSP7. The permanent representative of that country, a key one in East Africa, has assured us that there is a high-level political endorsement and that the government is favorably considering joining the ATT. We look forward to officially announcing the good news and welcoming our sister country to the ATT in the near future. I would also like to congratulate the Philippines for approving the ratification of the treaty. My president is particularly pleased to see this development following his letter sent to His Excellency President Rodrigo Duterte, President of the Philippines, encouraging that country to join the treaty, and our strong engagement, including meetings with that country's permanent representative in Geneva. You may know that the Philippines Parliament has voted to ratify the treaty. As you are aware, during my presidency, we developed, along with the Interparliamentary Union, a project to engage members of parliament around the world in the universalization of the ATT in order to raise awareness among lawmakers around the treaty. Although we are still looking for funding for the project as a whole, IPU is financing the initial pilot project for the first round of webinar workshops in the coming months in the strategic region. A representative from IPU will provide further details on this during the interactive session. I strongly believe that direct interaction with parliaments of states that are not yet a party to the treaty is an innovative way to move forward the task of universalization and to meaningfully complement our current outreach strategy. In this context, I call on all state parties and stakeholders to support this project as it has the potential to secure a long-lasting impact. I look forward to continuing our engagement with parliamentarians through this project, along with Germany, as co-chair of the working group on treaty universalization during the CSP8 cycle. Certainly, on the part of my delegation, we are focused on harnessing the necessary resources, including technical assistance and capacity building for prospective states to encourage the accession to the ATT in the near future. Ambassador Gobel and I are looking forward to undertaking additional outreach activities over the coming months, and we will keep the ATT community duly informed. I thank you, Ambassador. I thank you for the collaborative work that we are doing together.
Thank you, Ambassador Gabri. Thank you for this update, and thank you for your ongoing efforts you just described for universalization of the treaty. That's good news for Gambia. I would have touched also the Philippines. I know that we will certainly hear some news from the Philippines also during our meeting today. But let me already just underline that it's indeed great news that they have finished their ratification process, and we are looking forward to welcoming them very, very soon here in the ATT family. Perhaps I have some delegations who asked for the floor. Perhaps just to underline once more, if there are specific questions to what you've just heard regarding the efforts from the two co-chairs, then please go ahead. Otherwise, I would just point out that we have an agenda item, which is agenda item 5, where every delegation would have the opportunity to explain and to inform about their own efforts to promote the universalization of the treaty. So having said this, I would again ask the question, who would like to take the floor at this time, perhaps really concentrating on clarifications of what we've just heard from the two co-chairs. So, shall I take Gambia? Okay. So I take Gambia. So with this, I would start to give the floor to the delegate of Gambia, please. Gambia, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. We will present a statement, but we're trying to, our ambassador is trying to join the meeting. So probably before end of this session, he will join. Thank you.
So I understand you will come back and ask for the floor again. Okay, so then we go to the Republic of Korea. Republic of Korea, you have the floor, please. Madam.
Thank you, Ambassador, for giving me the floor. I took the floor just to make some general comments on the efforts to facilitate the universalization of the ATT by the co-chairs. I would like to appreciate the continuous efforts to facilitate the universalization of the ATT made by the co-chairs of the working group of the universalization and the Secretariat and civil society. The Republic of Korea highly appreciates the German President's outreach efforts towards signatory states, including largely those in the Asian region. We will actively cooperate in this line of effort to advertise the benefit of the joining the ATT and to lend a hand for signatory states' needs for mending knowledge gaps, among others. I would also like to appreciate the Ambassador of Sierra Leone's efforts to expand the number of states parties to the ATT in the African region. In July this year, the Korean Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy is planning to promote the ATT and the important role of the export control regime at the export control workshop, which will be held as a side event of the commemoration of the annual 2022 Trade and Security Day, in which relevant agencies and industries, domestic and abroad, are expected to participate. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, the Republic of Korea. I give the floor to the delegate of the State of Palestine. Please, Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Arms control and disarmament in education is an important factor in advancing the universalization of the treaty. Whereas media has a crucial role in promoting favorable public opinion towards the ATT's humanitarian purpose. Therefore, Palestine supports considering new areas of activities towards universalization, including utilizing media and education for advocating and promoting the treaty, and also approaching parliaments in the states that are not parties to the treaty. Thank you.
Thank you, State of Palestine. So this ends my list of speakers for this agenda item, and we would then on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 4. At this stage, under agenda item 4, I would like to invite the head of the ATT Secretariat to give us an overview presentation of the status of ATT ratifications and accessions. Please, Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, in your capacity as the co-chair of the working group on treaty universalization. And I would want to start off by just thanking both co-chairs of the working group for affording us the opportunity to provide an overview as a secretariat of the status of participation in the ATT at this point in time. All right, I apologize. As it has become usual in our presentation of this overview, we normally provide an overview that has got particular section. One section is about the global overview of participation, and that is normally followed by the regional perspective, which is the regional overview. And we also look at the distribution of states by region, as well as state parties by those particular regions. And we'll conclude by looking at the rate at which our states parties became states parties. And I think that is important that we highlight that. What we have on the board at the present moment is a general overview of ATT participation. And as you can see, that at this point, we have 110 states parties. We are happy to have reached this milestone. But this milestone, you remember that it was reached. We reached that number in August 2020. So it's been a while since we had a new states party. So in August 2020, we reached that number. But of course, then you'll be aware that states become states parties to the ATT through different methods, basically according to the constitutional arrangements in their own state. Others sign the treaty and ratify it, and others, they sign and approve, and others sign and accept. But of course, there are those who had not had the opportunity to actually sign the treaty, because you'll be aware that in terms of Article 22 of the treaty, if I remember that well, once the treaty has come into force, the window of signing the treaty actually closes. So you do not become a state party, but you don't become a signatory state, but you proceed to become a fully fledged state party. So 11 states became state parties through that process. Now we have 110 state parties, but we have 31 states that have signed the ATT but have not yet deposited their instruments of ratification, acceptance, or approval. And I think on the website of the ATT, we've got details of the names of the states that are involved over here. But in the 31 states, of course, 30 of them are in that process, but one of the 31 states is a signatory state that had notified the depository of the ATT that they have got no intention of becoming a state party. That's USA. We are hopeful that that position would at some point be reconsidered. And then we've got 54 states. If you look at the membership of the United Nations, 54 members of the UN at this point in time are not yet having any association with the ATT. And that basically means that these are states that would probably expect us to contact and try to get them to become part of the ATT. The presentation, on the right of the presentation, we have a pie chart that tries to represent the numbers in a pie chart format. In terms of color coding, the green color indicates states parties, the orange color reflects signatory states, and the red color are states that have not yet joined the ATT. So we are pleased that at the very least, we've got more than half of the membership of the UN already being part of the ATT. But of course, we still have to have signatory states taking the final step of becoming states parties by undertaking their national processes of either ratification or accession or approval. We are happy that we are introducing or discussing this overview during the session of the Working Group on Treaty Universalization, which has got a very clear mandate. If we understand the terms of reference of this working group very well. This working group sets the platform for all ATT stakeholders to exchange views on best approaches to deploy in advancing treaty universalization. And I suppose that for Mr. President or co-chairs, part of the discussion that will take place here is about how best stakeholders are doing in advancing the ATT. What kind of approaches are they taking? Which approaches are becoming much more effective than others? We're happy to listen to Germany, their experience insofar as the demarches are concerned. And of course, we look forward to hearing other states telling us of their efforts. The second slide of the presentation, if I can ask my colleagues to move to the next slide, I'm unable to move it from here. The second slide of the presentation looks at the distribution of states and states parties by regions. On the left of the presentation, we've got a pie chart that tries to address the distribution of UN member states by region. Basically saying, if you look at the UN membership, how many states are coming from what region? That is what the pie chart on the left represents. But the pie chart on the right actually looks at the distribution of states parties to the ATT and how they are spread across the various regions of the world. One observation to make, we can discuss this at length, but in the interest of time, there's just two observations that I would want to make, just to demonstrate the relationship between the two. For instance, the first one is, if you look at the pie chart on the left, look, for instance, at Europe as a region. Europe constitutes about 22% of the UN membership. That is where they are. But if you look on the right, states parties coming from that region constitute about 35% of ATT members. So it means there are many states parties coming from that region. Whereas they are not probably the biggest region in terms of UN member states. But in contrast to that, if you look at another region, Asia, for instance, Asia constitutes about 25% of UN member states. 25 member states of the UN come from that region. But if you look on the right, and you therefore realize that from Asia, only 9% of states parties that we have are coming from that region. So that is the contrast. And I think the president had highlighted this in his earlier remarks, that as a result of this, you can start to see areas of the globe where the effort or the growth of the ATT is still possible. Because these numbers or these are representations tell us the story, how best we can target our efforts, how best we can jointly encourage states to become states parties. If we can move to the next slide, please. The next slide reflects the distribution of states by regions in terms of whether they are states parties, secondary states, or other states. And again, we have looked at various regions. I must say, though, that we are relying on the UN statistical division numbers in categorizing the regions. And I think it works better for us in terms of reflecting about every state that there is across the globe. You will notice that, for instance, the first pie chart on the left, which is Africa alphabetically, of course, you will see that 52% of members from that region are state parties to the ATT, but of course, the other ones are not. 22% are signatory states, as well as 26% still have to join the ATT. But if you look at all the regions, you will therefore see that the Europe as a region has the highest number of state parties. It's 91% at the present moment, followed by the Americas, which is at 79%, if you look at the numbers over there. And the third one is Africa at 52%, and followed by Oceania at 40%, and Asia at 21%. And again, this helps to buttress the message that I had before, that the growth of the ATT still has an opportunity in the Asia region. I think Europe is almost saturated, but the other region, there's still an opportunity for growth of the ATT. But whilst we're looking at these numbers, another message that is important is, I remember way back in terms, a few years back, this working group would, not officially, but there was a discussion that we need to have a target that we are working towards. I remember in 2018, at some point, we reached the milestone of 100 state parties. And that was a target that all efforts were working towards at that time. But in 2018, we reached 100 state parties. And in 2020, we reached 110. Then the question to the co-chairs and all other participants is, what is our next target? Is it 105? Is it 110? But that's what we have to have a discussion about, because we need to have a target to work towards. But to set a target is one thing, but target must be accompanied by effort. And the effort can be quite challenging. And I think these are the points that the co-chairs I'm just raising here as possible points of discussion by this meeting. If I can have the next slide, please. The next slide, it tries to show a rate at which state parties became state parties, the time at which they became state parties. Just to give context to this, firstly, you will recall that the ATT was adopted by the General Assembly in 2013 April, and it opened for signature on the 3rd of June 2013. And of course, it came into force then in December 2014, after having reached the threshold of 50 state parties. So for purposes of this slide, I will try to set a baseline. So the baseline is when the ATT opened for signature, which is the 3rd of June 2013. If we take that as a year, to the following June, which is 2014, becomes year number 1. And from June 2014 to June 2015 becomes year number 2, and so on and so forth. So if you follow that as a logic, what you therefore see in the first year, year number 1, we had 32 states that became state parties. And in year number 2, we had 37. In year number 3, we had 16 states parties becoming, or states becoming states parties. And year number 4, the numbers are starting to go down. Year number 4, it's 7. Year number 5, 3. Year number 7, 6. And year number 7, 4. And 8 is 4 again. And unfortunately, at year number 9, we still have a 0. I hope that will change before this time is up. But what you observe here is that in the first 3 years of this, there were many states that became states parties. And of course, there could be reasons why which we can advance to explain that. At the time, many states who were politically inclined to the ATT were part of the negotiations and all of it. After the adoption of the ATT, therefore, they had to undertake their national processes to join the ATT. So it is to be expected that there were many states that became states parties in the first 3 years. However, from year number 4 onwards, you start to have a low number of states simply because, in our view, that is where the heavy lifting started. Because some of the states that are there are states that were not necessarily at some point closer to the process, but they become closer to the process and become states parties simply because there is some promotion of the ATT that is made. And the same then happens with all the other states. So I do hope, co-chairs, that during the tenure of the current co-chairs, the 0 on the far right of the presentation would turn into a different number, maybe another 4. Who knows? We are hopeful. The last slide, please. The last slide is nothing else but just an expansion of the slide that I had before. It's just to say, in terms of regions, what was the take, the rate at which states became states parties? And again, if you read that against the earlier figures or the earlier statistics that I've given, you will realize that in the first 2 to 3 years, year number 1, year number 2, year number 3, following the same logic, I think Europe was ahead of others in terms of joining the ATT, therefore followed by the Americas, and therefore Africa started to pick up some pace along the way. And of course, as you move to the far right, you start to see less numbers of states becoming states parties. We presented these numbers simply to give context to the rate of participation and the rate at which states become states parties, 1 and 2, and how we can better advance treaty universalization with this information in hand. Thank you so much, co-chairs. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Secretariat for this very comprehensive overview. I think it's in a certain way it's just numbers, but I think and also as it was presented, it gives a lot food for thought. The Secretariat mentioned already the question of targets and what is the aim. I already and we've heard it just when it comes to the efforts we are undertaking during our presidency. We have certainly a target, which is to work on this white spot, which is not white spot, but it's the low numbers in the Asia region. This is certainly something which needs combined and joint efforts to move this forward. And I completely share, and I think we as co-chairs, we completely share the hope just expressed that we will work on this number on the right side we have just seen. Let's say there is hope, as far as I understand, that we can we work on this and that we will have there another result at the end of the year. So with this, would any delegation take the floor at this time to address what we've just heard regarding the overview by the Secretariat? Yes, I see the state of Palestine. Please, Madam, you have the floor.
Mr. President, effective implementation can assist the universalization efforts. Palestine believes that states parties must be ambassadors of the treaty. They must be the role model in putting an end to irresponsible trade of conventional arms that undermines international peace and security and facilitates commission of serious crimes and threatens the international legal order. Mr. President, the global health crisis posed by the COVID-19 highlighted the urgency of reconsidering the notion of security. Our security is not achieved by spending billions on weapons of mass destruction and robot killers, but by investing in health system and education sector. For years, worldwide, billions have been spent on militarization, while healthcare and education have been neglected. The state of Palestine regrets that several state parties decided to continue to press on with arms deals with other states, including states that have a long, sadly very, very long history of war crimes and crimes against humanity, despite international shortages of masks, ventilators, and protective equipments. If states parties implement effectively the treaty, other states will have no choice but joining the treaty. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished delegate, the state of Palestine, and I give the floor to the delegate of France. France, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and congratulations once again for your presidency and for your presentation of your efforts. My thanks also to the Secretariat for the very complete and expressive presentation that has just been made on the situation of universalization. Mr. President, I'll be succinct. We would simply like to recall the aim of the ATT. This treaty aims at imposing the strictest international standards and to prevent illicit trade or diversion. And that is why it is essential to work for its universalization, because it is the actual implementation by the state parties, in other words, universalization, which will make it possible to ensure that the regulation of international arms trade is coordinated. This effort must be global, and that is why we need to continue to maintain our efforts, and we are looking forward to future ratifications and membership. We would like to welcome your efforts, as well as those that have been undertaken by Sierra Leone in the CSP7, and all the efforts and activities undertaken by the Secretariat for the implementation of the universalization activities. You can be assured, Mr. President, that you have the full endorsement of France in your efforts. This is a topic which is essential within the concept of the ATT, and only the membership of the largest number of states will make it possible to impose this treaty as a true international standard. We'd also like to welcome the efforts that have been undertaken by the European Union as member states within the European program, contributing to the universalization of the treaty. And France is participating actively in this program through the French cooperation, which is called Expertise France, and also through the mobilization of national experts serving workshops which take place throughout the world. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the delegate from France.
Give the floor to the next speaker, which is Matt for Peace, which will be followed by the delegation of China. So Matt for Peace, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, for giving me the opportunity to speak in order to prevent the dissemination of the illegal weapons or trade of weapons. We thank the Secretariat for the great efforts that it carries out and for the presentation that it presented a while ago. In the context of the universalization of the treaty, we can promote and no doubt that the organizations of the civil society play a great role in raising the awareness of individuals, stakeholders, and organizations with regards to the illegal trade of weapons. The civil society can carry out dialogues with stakeholders and promote them and convince countries to ratify and accede to this treaty. In this context, we would like to inform you that MAT Foundation has carried out activities in implementing the treaty. We need more countries to accede and join and promote the treaty, and that there be more actors in the civil society to explain the provisions of the treaty and to promote that treaty. Ma'at did carry out some single and individual activities and carried out some training on topics that have to do with monitoring and reporting in relation to the treaty. And in order to raise awareness with regards to that treaty, we have issued 2 reports on the margins of the 7th conference of the state parties, which had to do with the small and light weapons. Now, in the global context, the MAT Foundation sees that today it has become very important for the organizations of the civil society to carry out an important role to encourage countries to ratify this treaty, especially in the Middle East, and that the civil society have a great role with the presence of organizations in the Middle East and the presence of speakers and experts who are very well aware of the treaty itself. At a time when we see a great deal of trade in weapons in the Middle East. Unfortunately, the efforts of the civil society are quite weak in this region, and therefore there are a number of organizations that are led by MAT Foundation to reduce the dissemination of weapons in the Middle East, and we are launching the Arab Initiative, which is the first of its kind in the Arab region, and we are happy to speak about such an alliance through your meeting and through the preparations for the 8th conference of the State Party. And we have to promote this treaty and to encourage countries to ratify it, to sign it, to accede to it. We have scholars, we have lawyers, we have experts in the civil society, and all can join this alliance. We are honored to invite you, sir, and all those who are interested to join a workshop tomorrow that is launched by MAT Foundation as part of the series of the activities tomorrow at 4:30 Geneva time, and on a Zoom platform, how to implement the treaty. Now, you will find the title of this workshop on our official website. I thank you, sir, and I thank all the speakers for providing us with this opportunity to speak, and we are hopeful that all the countries of the world will join this treaty, and that we live in a world that is free of weapons, free of conflicts, free of wars, and all the problems that are killing millions of people. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
I thank the representative of the MAT Foundation for his intervention. And next speaker on my list is the delegation of China, followed by Mauritania. Please, delegation of China has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I take this opportunity. The Chinese delegation thanks the co-chairs and the chairs of the working group for their efforts and arrangements. We thank the co-chairs in promoting the unionization for his efforts and thank the Secretariat for his introduction. China always recognized the purposes and the objective of the treaty. We have attended the COPs. In 2017, China officially acceded to the treaty, reflecting China's firm determination and support for multilateralism and its determination and sincerity in joining the arms trade process. We noticed that the purpose and the objective has been recognized by more countries, reaching 110 states parties with increasing universalization. However, some leading arms traders still have not yet joined the treaty. The largest exporter of conventional arms did not ratify the treaty. Rather, it also revoked its signature. China calls upon some countries to correct its wrongful practices and return to the treaty. We also urge other countries that have not joined to actively consider the accession. Some developing countries might face capacity, technical and funding difficulties on the ground relating to compliance, which does not help to make the treaty universal. China urges capable countries to enhance outreach activities, international cooperation and assistance that benefit countries in need, to encourage those countries to join the treaty and to increase capacity building for compliance in order to both motivate more countries to join the treaty and encourage states parties to implement the treaty. China will play its role model role and make greater contributions. Thank you.
I thank the representative of China for this intervention. And the next speaker of my list is Mauritania. Yes, Mauritania, please.
Bonjour, monsieur.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to take this opportunity to thank President Goebel, His Excellency Ambassador Gberi, and the head of the Secretariat, Mr. Dladla, as well as all the staff of the Secretariat. I'm not going to list all of the positive points that have been mentioned this afternoon that are necessary to regulate the illicit trade of weapons throughout the world. I would like to take this opportunity to reaffirm once again the commitment of my country, Mauritania, in the implementation of our treaty. We will continue to work hand in hand with other states parties to ensure the universalization of our treaty and drawing also on the efforts of civil society. This being said, I would like to highlight the importance of cooperation, both regional and international, in order to ensure technological transfer and the transfer of equipment to states that have a need in those areas. In order to eradicate the traffic and identify trafficking routes and circulation mechanisms, as well as controls at borders that are porous, to say the least. And I would like to seize this opportunity once again to highlight what is happening in the Sahelo-Saharan band or strip. This is an area which is defined as being a no man's land, where there is intense circulation of weapons. And in this intervention, I would like to draw your attention to this issue, which is very significant in my opinion. I would like to thank all of those who've taken part in organizing this meeting and all of the participants, both in this room and online. Thank you for your attention. Let us unite. United we stand, divided we fall. It's very important to work together to ensure the universalization of our treaty. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Mauritania for the statement. May I remind you that we are still on the agenda item 4 of our agenda, which was the report of the ATT. As we are already in a debate and have quite a long list of speakers here, I would propose that we would move on in our agenda. If there is a specific question which has to be taken up concerning the report we've just heard, you may certainly do so, but I propose that we move to item 5 of the agenda, which is to open the floor for states to update the meeting about their efforts in promoting the universalization of the treaty. And this gives, I think, all the delegations the possibility to express itself. As we know, and I said already, we can accept some very good news, and it was also mentioned by my co-chair already. So I would, for that, move to agenda item 5, and the first speaker on my list will then be the distinguished delegate of the Philippines. Please, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The Philippines extends its appreciation for the exceptional work that the Chair, the Secretariat, and the officers of this Arms Trade Treaty Working Group and the first informal preparatory meetings had done, so that these meetings will go as planned despite the restrictions due to COVID-19. In the 70s, a ship named MV Karagatan, which was loaded with firearms, landed in one of the shorelines of southern Luzon in the Philippines. This armed the rebel group called New People's Army with 1,200 or so rifles, including rocket launchers, communication equipment, food, and medical supplies. Such had provided local terrorists with firepower and the tools for violence, and thus instant control over infested areas of the country. This shipment was the first known arms landing in the country, and since then, there were fatal armed confrontations between government troops and this terrorist group. This formed part of the illicit arms that had been pestering the Philippine countryside for more than 50 years now, which presented as a big hindrance in the country's attainment of sustainable development, endangering women and children on a daily basis and wreaking human suffering to all these years, not to mention the country's lost opportunities for progress. Considering the long life cycle of firearms, they are still doing damage to the country up to this day. This is one of the many reasons why the Philippines has always been committed to combating illicit trade of arms, which is strongly manifested in its active participation in international discussions, demonstrated by how the Philippine government has supported the Arms Trade Treaty ever since the idea was raised at the United Nations General Assembly in 2006. The country signed the ATT on 25 September 2014 at the UN headquarters in New York, making the Philippines the first country to do so in Southeast Asia. Mr. Chair, fellow delegates, it is with great pride that I would like to inform the President, the Secretariat of this body, that last January 26, 2022, the Philippine Senate made its end stage of deliberation and had finally concurred to a resolution recommending to ratify the treaty. Our instrument of ratification will hopefully be deposited with the UN Secretary General's office any day now. Looking back, while relevant government agencies understand the importance and benefit of the treaty, The ratification process of the Philippines on the ATT has not been easy. It entailed a lot of work, focus, and maybe timing, along with the collaboration with some of our legislators who found the benefits and merits from the ATT in reducing human suffering. In this regard, allow me to take this opportunity to express our sincerest gratitude and appreciation to our President, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, for endorsing it to the Senate, and our staunch sponsor, Senator Coco Pimentel and his staff, for being with us along the way. And to our international partners who have provided us technical assistance and trainings to capacitate government officials and personnel. The European Union, particularly Expertise France, and the German Federal Office of Economics and Export Control, who have been painstakingly working with us on treaty universalization the past few years. The Nonviolence International Southeast Asia, who have been providing technical assistance and expertise, especially to my office, the Office of the Special Envoy on Transnational Crime, and to our implementing agencies, the Department of Trade and Industry, the Philippine National Police, and the many faceless others who have helped and contributed to the effort of ratification in one way or the other. Moving forward, Philippines, through the DTI STMO and the PNP Firearms and Explosives Office, is definitely prepared to carry out the requirements of the ATT. The Republic Act number 106697, otherwise known as the Strategic Trade Management Act, its implementing rules and regulations signify to cover the provisional requirements to implement the ATT, particularly Articles 2-15B, which covers the strategic goods list. From the earlier discussions on standardizing risk assessment criteria and ways to implement transport requirements of conventional weapons, the Philippines remains committed to localizing these international best practices to our domestic legislations and that of holding dialogues with various national government agencies. Likewise, we welcome the expertise and experience of other jurisdictions experienced in implementing the ATT. Our ratification of the ATT assures exporters worldwide that the Philippines maintains national controls following international standards, being one of the many steps in ensuring that we will be true to what we have signed up for. The harder task has just begun. The preparation of our initial report, the putting into effect of certain laws which are necessary for preventing illicit trade. Mr. Chair, the Philippines will continue to promote and uphold its support to this treaty, as it always had. Thank you for the honor of having this opportunity. Salamat and mabuhay.
Thank you very much. I thank the distinguished delegate of the Philippines, and it's really good, excellent news for the ATT. So welcome to the ATT. We are looking forward working with you very, very soon as a full-fledged member state in our meetings here in Geneva. Yes, yeah, congratulations. So next speaker on my list is the delegation of Gambia. So Gambia, please, you have the floor. You have Gambia online or?
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Excellent.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Please go.
Okay. Good afternoon, President of the President of the 8th Conference of State Parties, to the Armed Trade Treaty, Ambassador Thomas Goebel of Germany, Chair of the Working Group Treaty Universalization, Ambassador Lassana Giberi of Sierra Leone, Mr. Dimisani Deladla, Head of the Armed Trade Secretariat, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, our delegation is happy to deliver a statement under the agenda segment of the working group meetings and first CSP8 informal preparatory meeting, working group treaty universalization. We wish to express our appreciation for your commitment and engagement to leave no one behind since you assumed the presidency for the CSP8, and by extension, we commend the ATT Secretariat in conveying the preparatory meeting towards CSP8. Mr. President, the Republic of the Gambia is committed to the pronouncement at CSP7 by the Honorable Sheikh Omar Faye, Honorable Minister of Defense, that the Gambia is going to accede to the ATT. Since we have remained engaged with partners to understand steps to properly sail smoothly on the road to full treaty compliance. The Gambia is in cycle of election and preparing for the legislative elections in April 2022. Our situation suggests that some of our relevant existing laws, regulations, institutional arrangements, processes, and mechanisms need adjustment for the country to be in a position to fully implement the treaty. Distinguished delegates, we have determined that as part of our process to accede, we will undertake an assessment or gap analysis of current laws, institutions, and practices, and then develop action plan for addressing any gaps that might be identified. Mr. President, on that note, my delegation is pleased to inform you that the Gambia, through its Ministry of Defense, has submitted a project proposal to the Arms Trade Treaty Voluntary Trust Fund, VTF, to help support in the assessment that we mentioned earlier. We look forward to successful approval of our proposal by the committee of the VTF. We thank and encourage the donors of the VTF on behalf of our countries as beneficiaries. Mr. President, to conclude, I would like to thank Sierra Leone's permanent mission and Safer World for standing by us in this great journey to be part of the community of ATT. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Gambia for his intervention. And as for the Philippines, we are looking forward having you with us in the ATT family very, very soon. So with this, next speaker on my list is Japan, followed by Barbados. So Japan, please, you have the floor.
Japan would like to express its gratitude to Ambassador Goebel and Ambassador Ghibli for your efforts as co-chairs of the working group on treaty universalization. In particular, Japan highly appreciates Germany's strong initiative and leadership on universalization on ATT to conduct capital-based joint démarches in several countries to promote and encourage them to join the ATT. Japan is one of the countries who participated in the joint démarche through its embassies in each targeted state. We are pleased to contribute to further universalization on the ATT and are ready to work with co-chairs and other state parties. In this connection, Japan is very pleased to hear today that the Philippines government has proceeded with the procedure to join the ATT, and we are looking forward to its accession to the treaty very soon, and Japan will warmly welcome to the Philippines as a new state party. Japan was also pleased to hear the announcement of the government of the Gambia during the CSP7, and today its intention to join the ATT. We are looking forward to its early accessions to the treaty. Japan places great importance on the universalization on ATT, in particular in the Asia-Pacific region. Together with Australia, New Zealand, and Control Arms, we co-hosted the Asian Pacific Universalization Roundtable virtually last year. Japan has also encouraged non-state parties to join the ATT, taking the opportunities to hold bilateral dialogue on disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control where possible. Lastly, we would like to call on all non-state parties, including signatory states that have not yet done so, to accede to and ratify the treaty as soon as possible, and we would like to express our commitment to work toward the universalization of the ATT. I thank you, co-chairs.
I thank the distinguished delegate Japan for this intervention. And next speaker on my list is Barbados, followed by Mexico. So Barbados, you have the floor, please.
Mr. Facilitator, having listened attentively to the presentation by the head of the Secretariat, particularly as it relates to membership, I would want to say that the increase of membership is something that in most cases cannot be addressed by members of this conference. In order for membership to increase, there must be political will by those who have not yet joined. I therefore suggest that a push towards this effort should be made through the United Nations. Now, Barbados is fully committed to fulfilling its obligations under the Arms Trade Treaty. With that having been said, Barbados is currently reviewing its laws and will soon seek to have amended legislation that will see it fulfill our obligations. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Barbados for this intervention. And so next speaker on my list is Mexico, followed by the European Union. So the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me all right. We'd like to acknowledge the efforts carried out by the co-chairs of the Working Group on Universalization, Ambassador Thomas Goebel and Ambassador Lansana Ngebri from Sierra Leone. For my government, the call for universalization of the ATT is more timely than ever. Every month, there are more deaths caused by weapons, especially by small and light weapons that fall in the hands of organizations that shouldn't have those weapons. In order to fight against, we will only be able to revert this negative trend by fighting against the illicit trade of conventional weapons. We'd also like to acknowledge the efforts of the Gambia and Philippines and their good news, and we hope to see them very soon as formal state members of the ATT. We also need to focus our efforts, our universalization efforts, on the Asian Pacific region, which is one of the most affected by the negative results or consequences of weapons. We need to maintain consultations with the main importers and exporters beyond that region to explain to them the benefits of exceeding the treaty. We need to continue working with parliamentarians, with MPs, and we think that we need to maintain that outreach effort to improve their understanding of the treaty. The co-chairs of the Working Group on Universalization could perhaps also use high-level meetings of organizations and different fora on the control of weapons and regional and sub-regional meetings to promote universalization of the treaty. We also acknowledge the efforts of the presidency regarding the common démarche, which they explained at the beginning of the session. And we suggest to include in that procedure other countries that have a similar vision to that of the countries that already are participating in that exercise. We'd also like to appreciate the efforts of civil society organizations who have worked to promote universalization of the treaty, often with a few resources. If we want to fulfill our objective of universalization of the treaty, all of us will need to work, and we can all, to a greater or lesser extent, offer technical and legal capacity and raise awareness regarding universalization of this treaty. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative from Mexico for the statement, and the next speaker on my list is the European Union. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor, and let me congratulate you also on your appointment as the chairperson of the conference of the 8th Conference of State Parties. You have the full support of the EU. I have the honor to make this statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states and the candidate countries Turkey, Republic of North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, the country of the Stabilization and Association Process and potential candidate Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the EFTA countries Iceland and Norway align themselves with this statement. At the outset, we want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for carrying out this important intersessional work. We would like to commend the German presidency of the 8th Conference of State Party for its leadership in prioritizing universalization of the ATT, in particular during these continuously exceptional times. Your outreach efforts and démarches in this regard are even more appreciated, and we were happy to be able to contribute through our EU delegations in the field. We want to thank the representatives also of civil society, many of whom are here with us, either virtually or in the room, for their relentless dedication to promoting the ATT. It is essential that civil society organizations continue to sustain targeted activities at national and regional levels in support of ATT universalization, indeed to build the political will and to do this through targeted advocacy and information sharing. We're looking forward to the accession of Gambia, state party, following the announcement by the Gambian defense minister at the last conference of state parties in August 2021. And we also warmly welcome the agreement in the Senate of the Philippines to ratify the ATT and are happy to learn today that the Philippines will become a state party any day soon. And we're obviously very grateful to have been able to contribute slightly to that process through our ATT outreach project implemented by BAFA and Expertise France. These hopeful developments are a proof of the continuous and increasing relevance of the ATT and bring full universalization of our commonly agreed norms a step closer. Mr. President, it is our common goal to establish the highest possible common standards for regulating international trade in conventional arms and to prevent and eradicate the illicit trade in conventional arms and ammunition and prevent their diversion. We reiterate our call on all UN member states, especially the major arms importers, exporters, and transit states, to ratify or accede to the ATT without further delay. The EU invites all our partners here in the room and elsewhere to redouble our efforts and to increase our collective engagement and outreach efforts to non-state parties, underlining the benefits of joining the ATT and thus contributing to international and regional peace and stability. While the EU welcomes the progress made on universalization to date, we continue to believe that more can be done. The EU and its member states, we continue to play an active role in universalization efforts through the démarches that have been mentioned already, through our outreach programs, ATT outreach programs, support with the ATT Secretariat, and by addressing the issue in the context of EU bilateral dialogues on disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control with third countries. We hope that other states do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I thank the representative of the European Union for this statement. So I still have two speakers under agenda item 5 on my list. We are running out a little bit of time, and we're up for a very important agenda item, which is agenda item 6, where we will hear about the efforts of civil society. So please, I ask all of you to be as brief as possible in your intervention. So the last two speakers on this agenda item are the delegation of Fiji, followed by Cameroon. So Fiji, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Definitely, Fiji delegation will be very brief with regards to its intervention this afternoon. First, to thank you, Mr. President, and to render our full support to you with regards to your chairmanship of the 8th conference of the CSP. And our thanks as well to the Secretariat for their enlightening presentation as they are presented this afternoon. First and foremost, Fiji recognized the universalization effort by the Secretariat and state parties, and we hope also to finalize our internal domestic process soon to materialize our membership of the ATT. Secondly, we recognize and commend the support provided by the Voluntary Trust Fund under the ATT, including the support provided by all members to the Voluntary Trust Fund, which is critical in our view for the universalization effort, and including Fiji being very much provided the necessary support. And we also recognize and thank the relevant institutions for these universalization efforts and countries for their support, in particular our bilateral partners in the Asia-Pacific region for their continued consideration and their continued involving the Pacific, Asia-Pacific, including Fiji, with regards to their approach. Fiji all along recognized the critical role of the ATT, and we were fully engaged, as you know, all throughout the ATT negotiation process and the drafting phase in this regard. And we remain committed today, given our geographical setup and the maintenance of peace in our region. As I said, Mr. President, we hope to finalize our internal process soon and to get back to become a member of the ATT at time very soon. And I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Fiji and also for this hopeful remarks at the end. And with this, I give the floor to the representative of Cameroon. Please, you have the floor, Cameroon.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. At a time when I have the pleasure of speaking in the name of Cameroon, I would like to renew my congratulations to Thomas Goebel for his brilliant chairmanship and presidency. Also, the contribution of all the working groups and the Secretariat for the good organization of our work in order to promote the universalization. Cameroon, as Kinshasa Convention presidency, has organized a certain number of activities of 4 countries of the sub-region, which are either signatories or not yet signatories to the treaty. And thus in September 2019, thanks to the constant assistance of partners such as European Union, our country organized in Yaoundé a workshop aimed at developing an awareness of countries of the sub-region that had not yet gone into ratification of ATT. And we noted the difficulties which these states are facing in operational and standardization and legislative procedures. Thus, we'd like to welcome the efforts for universalization. Cameroon would also like to highlight the key role of civil society in the awareness activities of public authorities and parliamentarians for ratification to the ATT. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the delegate from Cameroon
list of speakers under this agenda item. And looking at time, I would then proceed and move on to item 6 of our agenda, which is the last item this afternoon. And at this stage, I would like to open the floor for civil society and industry to update the meeting about their efforts in promoting the universalization of the treaty. I have already 3 speakers on my list, and start with Control Arms, followed by IPU. So please, the delegate of Control Arms, you have the floor.
Thank you, co-chairs. Control Arms congratulates the co-chairs of this working group, Ambassador Gobel of Germany and Ambassador Gberi of Sierra Leone, for their proactive start to this year's work on universalization of the Arms Trade Treaty. Control Arms looks forward to working with you both in bringing on board new states parties in 2022. As we support the ratification and accession of new states parties, we emphasize that universalization must be tied to effective implementation of the ATT by all states parties, current and future. This remains the key to its success in setting the highest possible common international standards for regulating the international trade in conventional arms. Control Arms welcomes the progress made by the Philippines towards joining the ATT and looks forward to learning more about their implementation plans. It is significant that we are now on the cusp of welcoming the first ASEAN member state as a state party to the treaty. Control Arms urges other ASEAN member states to expedite their own progress towards joining the ATT. Last year, Control Arms welcomed the announcement at the 7th Conference of States Parties by the Republic of the Gambia that it had decided to accede to the ATT, and we welcome the update delivered today. Solidifying the ATT as the globally recognized standard for the transfer of conventional arms requires demonstrating the relevance of the treaty to all regions. Given the high incidence of conflict and low levels of accession, one region in which a discussion on arms transfers and international law is essential is the Middle East and North Africa. Late last year, Control Arms, along with its coalition member, Permanent Peace Movement in Lebanon, hosted a roundtable on universalization of the ATT in the Middle East and North Africa region. The roundtable provided the opportunity for a robust discussion on the benefits and challenges of joining the ATT at the national and regional levels, and highlighted the treaty's potential to contribute to peace and security. As the work on universalization has progressed over the last several years, a number of useful tools have been developed, including the ATT Universalization Toolkit. More recently, the CIPRI paper titled Taking Stock of the Arms Trade Treaty Universalization provides a valuable assessment of the progress and challenges encountered to date. Last year, Control Arms, with the support of the government of Germany, produced the report titled Arms Trade Treaty Regional Actor Study, which focuses on how different regional actors support the universalization and implementation of the ATT. The study can be accessed on the Control Arms website in English, French, and Spanish, and a follow-up handbook on regional actors and the ATT is forthcoming. With consultations and events in capitals, virtual roundtable discussions, regional meeting engagements, resource development, and coordination with a range of ATT stakeholders, Control Arms will continue to use the strength and the reach of our coalition members around the world to advance toward the universalization of and faithful adherence to the Arms Trade Treaty. Thank you, co-chairs.
Thank you. I thank the representative of Control Arms for his statement. And this brings me to the next speaker on my list, which is the Interparliamentary Union, so IPU. Please, you have the floor.
By using these tools, they can truly become champions for the ATT and fight against armed violence. We just heard the representative from the Philippines about the key role that Senator Pimentel had in the ratification of the ATT. For sure, bringing in parliamentarians as active players in ATT universalization ensures a certain level of local and national ownership of the solution adopted, and it provides citizens buy-in. To involve parliaments, the IPU has prepared a project where parliamentarians of states that are not yet a party to the ATT will be gathered in regional or sub-regional workshops in order to discuss and address the specific roadblocks that are holding back their countries from joining the treaty. Gathering local expertise, media, civil society, and parliamentarians for each target region will provide a more complete picture of the reality of small arms and light weapons proliferation in each context and help parliamentarian champions for ATT ratification based on trusted data. This should also help better understanding the reasons behind non-adherence to the treaty and get away from the one-size-fits-all solutions that are clearly not an option. To increase interest in the treaty, we feel that there's a need to shift to a more people-oriented and context-specific approach that will target the root causes of insecurity through the promotion of sustainable development, human rights, and better inclusion of civil society. That is what parliaments can really help with. And because the IPU firmly believes that parliaments are key in the universalization of the ATT, a treaty that could ultimately benefit to all their constituents, it has allocated initial funding to carry out a first pilot workshop. We intend that our results will be featured during the CSP8 in August, and we truly welcome any input from ATT stakeholders in the meantime. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you. I thank the representative of IPU for the statement. And next speaker on my list is the representative of ASA. So ASA, you have the floor, please. This will be online as well. So I think we have a technical problem here. So I propose, as we have still another demand for the floor, that we start with first with Malaysia. So Malaysia, I give you the floor.
Excusez-moi, Monsieur le Président, et nous n'avions pas bien compris.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. I hadn't realized that you were giving me the floor. Acer would like to thank you for the work that you've carried out on the universalization of the treaty, as well as with Ambassador Gibri, and we hope that these efforts will be continued throughout 2022. We would also like to thank Domitani Dadla for his very clear presentation of the status of the universalization of the treaty. We would also like to welcome the Philippines and thank the work of our colleagues of the Philippines who, with parliamentarians, have been able to reach this result, as well as Gambia that indicated its intent to join the ATT. Mr. President, I will be succinct. The best illustration for universalization of the treaty to be effective remains in the objective application of the ATT, and within the ATT, prevention of any infringements against human rights. If human rights are indivisible and universal, it appears today, in 2022, that their application is not fully aligned because the practice of certain states, members of the ATT, like France, the UK, Belgium, Italy, Canada, that continue to export weapons to countries of the coalition led by by Saudi Arabia in the war in Yemen, where there are serious violations of human laws, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, as our report of the 10th of December 2020 has shown. Mr. President, the best method of implementing this universalization of the treaty for the state parties is to comply with it in the spirit and in the letter. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to thank the delegate of Acer, and my apologies for having poorly recognized your attempted.
This is the delegation of Malaysia, so please, Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the governments of Germany and Sierra Leone for their efforts in universalization activities across all regions, particularly in Asia. Malaysia has been a supporter to this treaty since the beginning of the treaty negotiations. Malaysia signed the treaty on 26 September 2013. Since then, we have been actively working with Malaysian ministries and agencies to review our legislations with the aim to ratify the treaty. The first few years after signing the treaty, Malaysia focused our efforts to raise awareness about the importance of the treaty to our local agencies, especially the enforcement officers. We also have identified several existing legislations that could comply with all obligations under the treaty. We also had sent quite a number of officers to various workshops to instill awareness and enhance knowledge about the treaty and its implementation. We thank states, international organizations such as Japan, EU countries, GCSP, and Arms Control for their efforts to continue providing us training and assistance, which have greatly helped us to continue working towards ratifying the treaty. These trainings and workshops have helped us to assess our readiness to ratify the treaty, as well as to identify the elements which we think could be improved in ensuring our compliance to the treaty. With regard to the status of ratifying to the treaty, Malaysia is working closely with all relevant Malaysia's ministries and agencies in efforts to ratify the treaty. Coming from a country such as Malaysia, which is not an arms exporter nor a major importer, our focus is to ensure that we have the relevant legislations and procedures to comply with all requirements under the treaty, particularly requirements regarding trade activities such as transit, transshipment, and brokering. We hope we could learn from other countries on how do they implement these provisions, including the guidelines regarding the risk assessment and preventions of diversion. In concluding, Malaysia remains committed to objectives of this treaty, and we will continue to work towards ratifying this treaty. Thank you.
I thank the Distinguished Delegate of Malaysia for this statement. This concludes my list of speakers, so we are also already over time. But I have to ask you, would any other delegation ask for the floor at this stage? So if this is not the case, so then we have reached the end of our meeting. I would give the opportunity to my co-chair to say a very short last word before I then conclude the meeting. Please, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to thank you, Mr. President, for the collaborative approach towards this work of universalization. You've constantly called me, we speak from time to time, and we brief me on what you are doing. I thank you for the extensive efforts you've already launched. I thank the Secretariat, as always, for the great competence with which they organize these events, whether hybrid or in person or just virtual. It's been they're a fantastic team at the Secretariat. I thank the Philippines, the parliamentarians, and the government of Philippines for the important stride they've made to be part of this community. I thank the Gambia for remaining committed to the commitment that they made in the previous presidency. Thank you all, and I wish we all that this membership has not plateaued, that we are still on course, and the membership will grow. Only by growing do we demonstrate the great relevance of the ATT community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Gabri, and I certainly join you with what you have just said. I would like to thank you all for your active participation and continued support and collaboration. I'm very encouraged by several announcements we've just heard. When it comes to universalization, I think we have very good perspective. I would also thank the representatives of civil society for their really invaluable efforts to promote universalization. I think our aim being to bring the number of member states as close as possible to universality is still valid, and we have all to join our efforts in this regard. So I also would like to thank the interpreters for giving us quite some extra time. So thank you very much. Thank you also to Ambassador Gabri, co-chair, and the Secretariat for having so professionally arranged for this meeting. And thank you to all of you, and have a nice afternoon. The meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. President, from the interpreters.